You see, when we talk about cheating, the conversation usually turns to men first. Statistically, socially, even comedically, men are painted as the repeat offenders. And yes, many do cheat, but what's rarely acknowledged, because it challenges the comfortable narrative, is that women cheat too. In fact, increasingly, women are cheating more than men. Not loudly, not clumsily, but quietly, emotionally, and with calculated precision. This isn't about blaming or vilifying women. This is about truth. And the truth is, women don't cheat the way men do. Men tend to cheat for thrill, for novelty, sometimes out of immaturity or ego. For many men, it's a one-night act, a physical release, and then back to normalcy, as if nothing ever happened. Women, it's almost never just physical. When a woman cheats, it's often the result of a gradual emotional departure, a quiet shift, a buildup of unmet needs, unspoken frustrations, and a longing for something deeper. Validation, attention, emotional connection. By the time a woman cheats physically, she has already cheated emotionally, weeks, even months ago. That emotional infidelity is the foundation. It's the reason she begins pulling away from her partner while appearing fine on the surface. She doesn't stop being affectionate overnight. She doesn't start screaming or accusing. Quite the opposite. She becomes emotionally efficient, smiling, nodding, but slowly disappearing. You start feeling the absence before you ever see the evidence. A woman might still cook, still kiss you goodbye, still laugh at your jokes, but something in her eyes has already turned cold. She's checking out. Emotionally, mentally, intimately. Her presence is a performance. And the cruel irony is, the better she is at concealing her dissatisfaction, the longer you live in a false reality. That's the psychological difference that catches most men off guard. We've been taught to look for physical clues. The secret phone, the suspicious texts, the late nights. But those are just the symptoms. The real betrayal is often internal. Subtle changes in tone, distance in conversations, and a strange detachment that wasn't there before. It's emotional dissonance. And it's dangerous because it's hard to prove but impossible to ignore. Let's be honest, women are, by nature, more emotionally intelligent than men. They've been socialized to read emotional cues, manage interpersonal dynamics, and navigate complex emotional landscapes. So when a woman chooses to cheat, she's not careless. She's methodical. She plans emotionally before she acts physically. She tells herself a story that justifies the betrayal. She repositions herself as the victim. And you unknowingly become the villain in her narrative. He stopped listening. He stopped making me feel special. He took me for granted. And maybe you did, but maybe you didn't. The point is, once a woman has made peace with the emotional justification, she can cheat and sleep at night. Because in her mind, you already broke the relationship first. That's what makes it harder to detect and harder to accept. It wasn't a mistake. It was a premeditated emotional transition. What men must understand, and this is critical, is that the signs are always there. You're just not trained to see them. A shift in her daily habits. A sudden obsession with privacy. Not just hiding her phone, but hiding herself. She's more defensive, more distant, or strangely, more cheerful, but in a way that feels artificial. It's not what she says. It's what she stopped saying. When a woman used to argue and now she's quiet, pay attention. That silence isn't peace, it's detachment. When she used to ask about your day and now it's just small talk, that's emotional disengagement. And when she starts comparing you to others, directly or subtly, she's mentally trying on a new life, a new man, a new chapter. The mistake most men make is thinking cheating has to look like sex, that it has to involve a hotel, a lie, a caught text. No. Sometimes, cheating is when she opens up to another man about things she used to tell you. When she saves her best emotional energy for someone else. When she dresses up for work but not for you. When her smile becomes performative and her touch becomes mechanical. And let's be real, some women are masters of emotional compartmentalization. They'll cheat, come home, and cook dinner, acting as if nothing happened. But that's not strength. That's emotional disconnection so deep. It becomes second nature, and it's often rooted in long-standing emotional wounds. Not just from you, but from her past. So, what do you do with this information? You don't become paranoid, you don't become controlling, and you certainly don't lose yourself in the pursuit of exposing her. You become emotionally intelligent. You pay attention. You communicate more. You stay present. And if the signs grow too loud to ignore, you confront her not with accusations, but with truth, with clarity, with courage. Because the goal isn't just to catch her cheating. It's to understand the emotional reality of the relationship you're in, to see it for what it is, not what you hope it is. We have to stop assuming women are emotionally pure simply because they cheat less obviously. The truth is, many women cheat emotionally long before they act physically. And that form of betrayal, the silent one, the invisible one, often hurts the most. So don't just look at her actions, study her presence, measure her energy, because that's where the truth lies, not in her words, not in her phone, but in the emotional space between you. Most men wait for the obvious signs. The lipstick, the missed calls, the sudden work trips that don't add up. But by the time you're looking for evidence, it's already too late, because when it comes to women, the most common signs of cheating are never the loud ones. They are the softest changes, the smallest inconsistencies, the emotional shifts that require sensitivity, not suspicion to detect. Here's the truth that too many ignore: a woman who is cheating rarely needs to hide. She just needs you to stop noticing. And that's easier than you think, especially when you're emotionally distracted, overconfident in the relationship, or too focused on surface-level stability. Men often assume cheating means something dramatic. Sneaking out at midnight, flirting with coworkers, a second phone hid under the mattress. But the real signs, they show up in silence, in withdrawal, in the gradual erosion of connection. Think about it, when a woman starts an emotional affair, she doesn't make noise. She makes room in her mind, room in her time, room in her heart. And suddenly, the man in front of her, the man she lives with, laughs with, maybe even sleeps beside, becomes a background presence in her life. She's there, but not really. She's engaged in conversation, but without spark. She touches you, but her energy is miles away. You feel her slipping, but you can't explain it, and she's not going to help you figure it out. If anything, she'll get better at pretending nothing is wrong. This is why the subtlest signs are the most dangerous, because they don't just slip under your radar. They train you to question your own instincts. You tell yourself she's tired. You justify her new obsession with privacy. You explain away the sudden emotional distance because life's been stressful, or she's just going through something. And maybe she is. But maybe you're watching the quiet dismantling of your relationship, one indifferent glance at a time. One of the most telling signs is when she stops arguing. And I want to emphasize this because it's a major red flag most men misread. When a woman is still emotionally invested, she will argue. She will complain, she will cry, she will try to make you understand her. But when she's already checked out, or investing that emotional energy into someone else, she no longer sees the point. She gives up the fight. And that silence isn't peace, it's resignation. It's the sound of someone who's already moved on but hasn't told you yet. And then there's the change in how she presents herself. Now, let's be careful here. Women evolve. They grow, explore new styles, fall in love with new aesthetics. That's normal. But when she suddenly starts putting extra effort into how she looks, and that effort is no longer directed at you, that's not evolution. That's redirection. If she used to wear sweatpants at home, and now she's dressing up more than usual, especially when leaving without you, ask yourself, who is she trying to impress? Of course, we don't want to reduce women to appearances. This isn't about control. This is about energy reallocation. When someone begins pouring their best into spaces you're no longer a part of, they're telling you everything you need to know without saying a word. Energy doesn't lie. Attention is currency. And who she gives that attention to, even subtly, reveals where her heart is going. You'll also notice her relationship with her phone changes. Suddenly it's always face down, always within reach. Passwords change. She turns away when texting. Notifications go silent. She carries it from room to room like it's an oxygen tank. And yet, when you ask what's going on, she'll look at you like you're the one acting crazy. She'll frame your concern as insecurity. Not because she's innocent, but because guilt is easier to manage when it's projected back onto you. But here's the part that cuts the deepest stick sometimes. When a woman is cheating, she becomes even more affectionate. She'll kiss you, compliment you, have sex with you, even enthusiastically, and you'll think everything is fine. But what's really happening is psychological compensation. She's overcompensating for the guilt she's carrying, trying to maintain the illusion, trying to convince herself, and you, that everything's normal. This is where many men are truly blindsided. They see the intimacy and assume that means loyalty. But sometimes the most dangerous betrayal is the one hiding inside the performance of love. Now, I want to make this very clear. Not every woman showing these signs is cheating, but every cheating woman shows signs. The challenge isn't just spotting them. It's having the emotional discipline to trust your intuition without becoming paranoid, and the maturity to observe patterns without accusing prematurely. The goal here isn't to become a detective. It's to become emotionally aware, to be a man who doesn't just see what's happening on the surface, but who understands the emotional weather of his relationship. Because women don't often destroy relationships in storms. They do it in silence, quietly, carefully, emotionally, until one day you wake up and realize you've been alone for months and didn't even know it. So if you're in a relationship, pay attention to the subtleties. Has she become emotionally unavailable but socially active? Has she stopped sharing her day but started protecting her phone? Has her tone shifted from warmth to obligation? These aren't random moments. These are emotional breadcrumbs leading you toward a truth you might not be ready for, but that you need to confront. Let's talk about power. Not the kind that makes noise, dominates the room, or demands submission, but the quiet kind. The kind that holds its ground in the face of betrayal. Because at the end of the day, catching a cheating woman is not about controlling her. It's about controlling yourself. It's about reclaiming emotional sovereignty in a moment where everything inside you wants to explode. It's about recognizing that no matter what someone else does, your reaction is your responsibility, and it defines who you are far more than her deception ever could. Most men, when faced with the suspicion of betrayal, fall apart. They become detectives, hackers, stalkers, emotional wrecks, haunted by questions, consumed by insecurity. They lose sleep. They lose clarity. And more often than not, they lose themselves in the pursuit of proving something that their soul already knows. But what if the real strength wasn't in catching her red-handed, but in confronting the situation without losing your mind, your masculinity, or your dignity? That's the deeper game, the harder path, and it's the one that separates boys from men, because anyone can react, anyone can shout, accuse, break down, spiral. But it takes a truly powerful man to face emotional betrayal with composure, with insight, with grounded authority. Not passivity, but power rooted in calm observation. A man like that doesn't just survive betrayal. He grows from it. And more importantly, he exposes the truth by being so emotionally centered that deception simply can't hide anymore. You see, when you react with panic or rage, you give away all your leverage. You reveal your fear. You show her how much she's shaken you. And in some twisted way, that can feed the very dynamic that led to her betrayal in the first place. But when you respond with clarity, with quiet conviction, with presence, you become unshakable. And an unshakable man is intimidating, not because he's aggressive, but because he's aware. Awareness is your greatest weapon. Emotional control is your strongest armor, and both require that you observe without assumption and act without desperation. If you suspect she's cheating, gather evidence. Not for revenge, but for truth, for yourself. Keep your eyes open, but keep your energy guarded. Because if you're wrong, you need to know that your suspicion didn't poison something innocent. And if you're right, you need to be ready to walk away. Not with bitterness, but with wisdom. Some of you might ask, but what if I love her? What if I've invested everything into this woman, this relationship, this life we built? And that's fair. That pain is real, but understand this: your love should never come at the cost of your self-respect. You can grieve, you can feel, you can even forgive, but you should never beg for loyalty. Never negotiate with dishonesty, because the moment you try to prove your worth to someone who betrayed you, you're teaching them that you accept betrayal as a price for love. And that's the trap. That's where so many men stay stuck. They confuse endurance with loyalty. They think holding on is a sign of strength, when in fact walking away, with grace, is the ultimate display of emotional maturity. When you catch a cheating woman, the goal isn't to win her back. It's not even to punish her. It's to reclaim your center, to ask yourself, who am I now that I know the truth? What kind of man do I want to be on the other side of this? Because there's no dignity in begging for explanations that don't change the facts. No peace in trying to rewrite a story that's already been lived. And no wisdom in choosing pain twice. First from the betrayal, and second from your refusal to leave it behind. You are allowed to hurt, to cry, to fall apart behind closed doors. But in front of the world, you rise. Not because you're trying to save face, but because you know your worth is not up for debate. Let's go deeper. Philosophically, betrayal shatters illusions. But that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes the woman you thought she was never existed. Sometimes the relationship was a comfort zone, not a connection. And sometimes we need betrayal to wake us up to who we really are. Pain, when handled properly, becomes clarity. Betrayal, when faced with strength, becomes transformation. That's not just emotional resilience. It's spiritual evolution. And yes, it's hard. Of course it is. But you weren't built to live a life free of challenges. You were built to become more conscious, more powerful, more self-aware with every wound. So when you catch her, and your heart is shaking, and your mind is racing, remember this: you are not defined by what she did. You are defined by how you respond. Let her go if she's lied. Let her go if she's broken the bond. Let her go not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that real love doesn't hide in shadows or sneak out at night. Real love faces itself in the mirror, even when it's uncomfortable. And if she couldn't do that, then she was never aligned with the man you're becoming. Because this journey isn't about her. It never was. It's about you. Learning to see clearly, to stand tall, to move forward, with or without her. Let's be honest. When it comes to cheating, most men think the solution lies in catching her first. If you just catch her texting the other guy, if you just get her location one night, if you just overhear that one call, then somehow the problem will be solved. But here's what no one tells you: catching her is never the real win. Even knowing the truth won't protect you if you haven't done the inner work. Because the deeper issue isn't just whether she's cheating. It's whether you've built yourself into the kind of man who cannot be emotionally manipulated, deceived, or broken by it. What most men don't realize is that a woman doesn't just cheat on your body. She cheats on your perception. She rewrites reality while you're still living in the version you thought was true. And when you start to question what's going on, when you sense something is off, the most dangerous thing she can do is not confess. It's to convince you you're crazy for even noticing. She'll reframe your awareness as insecurity. She'll say, "You're being paranoid," or "You're overthinking," when deep down she knows you're waking up to a truth she's not ready to admit. So this fourth key point isn't about reading her behavior. It's about rebuilding yours. It's about strengthening your emotional framework to the point that you're no longer prey to emotional illusions. Because the moment you stop needing her love to validate your worth, you gain something far more powerful: discernment. Discernment is different from suspicion. Suspicion is rooted in fear. It makes you anxious, reactive, desperate to prove something. Discernment, on the other hand, is calm. It's rooted in truth. It gives you the strength to observe without attachment, to notice without explaining away, and to act without seeking revenge. And that's the real power. The ability to see what's happening without needing her permission, to believe your own eyes. When you operate from that space, you stop chasing evidence and start trusting your instincts. You no longer need a private investigator or a dramatic confrontation. You can see the shifts in her energy, the contradictions in her words, and the inconsistency in her affection. And you no longer deny it just because you still love her. Because you understand that love is not a reason to tolerate betrayal. And that's where so many men get stuck. You want to believe the best in her. You remember who she used to be. You cling to the history, the laughs, the late night talks, the intimacy. But what you're really clinging to is a version of her that no longer exists. And if you're not careful, you'll let your memories talk you out of your reality. Let me say this: her past behavior doesn't excuse her present betrayal. And your past investment doesn't require your future loyalty. You don't owe your silence to someone who's already broken the unspoken bond. What you owe to yourself is the courage to leave the table when your presence is no longer respected. To recognize that you have to monitor, chase, and beg for love. It's no longer love. It's survival. So what does that look like in practice? It looks like this. You stop arguing when she stonewalls. You stop chasing when she pulls away. You stop justifying what your intuition already knows. And you start choosing your peace over your pride. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Some women cheat not just because they're unhappy, but because they think you'll stay even if they do. They gamble with your heart because they believe you won't walk away. They test the limits of your forgiveness, not because they want to be forgiven, but because they want to see how much power they hold over you. And every time you catch her in a lie and stay, every time you explain away the gut feeling, every time you lower your standard in the name of understanding, you teach her that your boundaries are flexible. And this isn't just about relationships. It's about self-respect. It's about becoming the kind of man who doesn't wait to be destroyed to rebuild himself. You train your mind to stay sharp, your heart to stay open, but your standards to stay non-negotiable. That means you remain kind but knowyourworth, loving but not blind, present but not easily played. Because ultimately, this isn't about women. It's about you. It's about how much of yourself you're willing to lose to keep someone else in your life. And whether or not you believe, deep down, that you deserve honesty. Not as a favor, but as a baseline. The moment you raise that bar, the games stop. Not because people stop playing, but because you're no longer sitting at their table. So yes, catching a cheating woman may hurt. The truth always stings before it sets you free. But what hurts more, what truly breaks a man, is not the betrayal itself. It's the slow erosion of his identity while trying to hold together something that's already falling apart. That's the real loss, not her but you. Forgetting who you are, what you deserve, and how powerful you become when you finally choose truth over illusion. You don't need to yell. You don't need to prove anything. You simply need to remember, a man anchored in self-respect doesn't need closure to walk away. His clarity is the closure. And that's the point. You don't catch a cheating woman to break her. You catch her so you can free yourself, so you can rebuild stronger, so you can love wiser, so you can live without fear. Because you know now that even betrayal cannot shake the man who knows exactly who he is. Let's take this even further. Because there's a level most people never talk about, and that's the part where a cheating woman doesn't just hurt you, she rewrites your identity in your own mind. And if you're not careful, you'll start to believe the worst about yourself. Not because it's true, but because it was easier for her to lie if you doubted your own value. This isn't just emotional damage. It's psychological warfare. And it happens quietly, gradually, until one day you're standing in the mirror and asking a question no man should ever have to ask. Was I not enough? That's the cost of unchecked betrayal. Not just the loss of a relationship, but the erosion of your inner foundation. And it's not always obvious at first. Because when a woman cheats, especially one you've loved deeply, the pain doesn't arrive like a punch to the face. It arrives like a whisper. It makes you question your instincts, your decisions, even your masculinity. You think, was I too distant, too soft, too busy? Did I push her away? And while it's important to reflect, there's a dangerous line between growth and self-blame. You cross that line, and she doesn't just walk away with your trust. She walks away with your sense of worth. But here's the truth: in her betrayal was never your reflection. Her lies were not evidence of your failure. And her decision to step outside the relationship had more to do with her own internal void than anything you lacked. See, when someone chooses deceit, they're not just reacting to their partner. They're revealing their own character. And a woman who chooses to cheat, instead of communicate, instead of confront, instead of grow, she isn't breaking you, she's exposing herself. Still, I know it's not that simple, because men are taught to internalize, to fix, to shoulder the blame. Society rarely gives men the emotional permission to feel broken, to process betrayal, or to even grieve love lost in silence. You're expected to just move on, to suck it up, to get over it. But how do you get over something that cracked your identity in half? You don't just get over it. You rebuild, you reframe, you return to yourself. Not the broken version of you she left behind, but the man you were before her betrayal, and the man you're capable of becoming now because of it. That process starts with one mindset shift. You stop making her choices about your value. You stop taking ownership of decisions she made in secret. You stop confusing your effort with her loyalty. Because no matter how much love you gave, how much time you invested, or how many chances you offered, a dishonest heart can never meet you at the level of honesty you bring. And that's not your fault. That's your lesson. And the lesson is simple, though not easy. You cannot love someone into being loyal. You cannot outgive their emptiness. And you cannot negotiate with someone who has already decided that your back is the best place for their secrets to hide. So you start to shift. You become more observant, not more paranoid. You raise your standards, not your walls. And instead of hunting for the next woman to heal you, you become the man who no longer needs healing from anyone else's damage. Because here's what happens when you do the inner work: you stop attracting people who only love the version of you they can manipulate. You stop entertaining women who are addicted to emotional chaos. You start becoming more intentional with your energy. And when a woman walks into your life now, she's either meeting a man who will elevate her, or she'll leave because she can no longer control him. That's not arrogance. That's clarity. That's knowing who you are without needing anyone's validation. That's looking betrayal in the face and saying, "You don't define me, you revealed me." And it's in that revelation that you realize something even more powerful. The pain was a tool, not a punishment. It stripped away the illusion. It forced you to look deeper. It made you ask the kind of questions that comfort never invites. Who am I when I'm not needed? What do I expect from love? What boundaries am I willing to enforce, even when it hurts? These are the questions that sharpen you, not into a colder man, but into a wiser one. And that wisdom becomes your protection. Not from heartbreak, but from the type of heartbreak you never deserved to begin with. The kind that comes not from love lost, but from the betrayal of loving someone who was never ready for your level of integrity. So if you've been broken by betrayal, don't stay broken. Sit with the pain, but don't make it your identity. Let it teach you. Let it sharpen you. Let elevate your standards, your self-respect, your sense of inner authority. Because you don't need to be harder. You need to be clearer. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you deserve. And clear about the fact that no woman, no matter how beautiful, how smart, how charming, has the right to diminish your worth through deceit. Now let's bring everything full circle. Because if we've talked about how women cheat, the signs to look for, and how to respond without losing your sense of self, there's one final truth we need to face. And it's this: if you truly want to protect yourself, you need to stop focusing on her and start focusing on you. Not in a selfish way, not in a cold or closed-off way, but in the most radical, honest way possible, by building a life, a mindset, and a purpose so rooted in truth that no woman, not even the most cunning, beautiful, or emotionally manipulative, can shake your foundation. See, a lot of men get caught in a cycle. She cheats, he hurts, he heals halfway, then he repeats. Different woman, same outcome. Why? Because even though he changed the relationship, he didn't change himself. He patched the hole in the boat, but didn't learn how to navigate deeper waters. And so the storm hits again, and he sinks. But the men who rise, the ones who don't just recover but elevate, those are the men who realize that emotional pain isn't just something to survive, it's something to use. And they stop asking, "Why did she do this to me?" and start asking, "What in me allowed this to happen, and how do I grow beyond it?" That level of ownership isn't easy. It's confronting. It makes you face the parts of yourself that were asleep while the relationship was dying. Maybe you ignored the signs. Maybe you wanted love so badly that you accepted crumbs. Maybe you thought loyalty meant staying even when your self-respect was eroding day by day. And it's okay to admit that, because self-awareness isn't shame. It's freedom. Once you begin to turn that mirror inward, everything changes. You stop asking how to catch a cheating woman, and you start asking how to become a man who never needs to chase clarity, because he lives in it. You start cultivating habits that make you emotionally unshakable. You start filling your life with purpose, discipline, and boundaries so strong that betrayal doesn't destroy you. It simply removes what wasn't aligned. That's the deeper transformation. And it doesn't come from reading her texts or decoding her behavior. It comes from building your character so deeply that your energy naturally exposes anyone who's not walking in truth. And I mean that literally. Because when you're aligned, when you're mentally focused and emotionally stable, people can't pretend around you for long. Their mask slips. Their patterns reveal themselves. Why? Because they sense, even if unconsciously, that you're no longer emotionally blind. You listen better. You observe more. You trust your gut. You speak up earlier. You leave faster when something doesn't feel right. Not because you're afraid, but because you're free. That's what most men are really looking for, even if they don't say it. Not just love, not just sex, not just loyalty, but freedom. Freedom from the fear of betrayal, the confusion of mixed signals, the emotional chaos of not knowing where you stand. And you don't get that freedom by controlling someone else. You get it by mastering yourself. And that self-mastery requires something few are willing to commit to: emotional discipline. Not reacting to every red flag with panic. Not tolerating disrespect disguised as communication problems. Not letting chemistry blind you to patterns you've seen before. Emotional discipline means choosing truth, even when fantasy feels better. It means walking away, not because it's easy, but because your peace is no longer for sale. And yes, it's hard, especially when the woman is beautiful, when the connection felt real, when the memories are still fresh. But I promise you, nothing is more attractive, more powerful, more liberating than a man who knows how to walk away from what isn't right without doubting his own worth. That man doesn't just catch a cheating woman. He makes it impossible for her to stay in his life without revealing herself first. Because here's something to remember. The kind of woman who betrays you isn't just testing your boundaries. She's testing your identity. She's asking, silently, who are you when you're hurt? Will you chase me? Will you forgive anything? Will you betray yourself to keep me? And your answer, not with words but with actions, defines the relationship from that moment forward. So choose clarity over confusion. Choose solitude over manipulation. Choose standards over feelings. Because the man who does that, consistently, without apology, is the man who eventually stops attracting chaos altogether. He creates an emotional environment where truth thrives and deception cannot survive. This journey isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole, strong, awake. The kind of man who doesn't just survive betrayal, but uses it as a mirror, a compass, and a catalyst.